5 things toxic partners do that look like care. What if some of the behaviors that made you feel the most protected were actually the behaviors limiting your freedom? That question is uncomfortable for a reason. Because most people assume toxic behavior should feel obviously harmful, intrusive, cruel, easy to identify. But many toxic dynamics do not begin by hurting you openly. They begin by helping you, supporting you, protecting you, caring about you in ways that seem deeply loving at first. Someone constantly checks on you. Someone always has advice about your choices. Someone wants to solve your problems before you even ask. Someone worries about where you are, who you're with, whether you're making the right decision. And instead of danger, you feel cared for, safe, emotionally important to someone. That is what makes this topic so psychologically confusing. Because some toxic partners do not control by being openly cruel. They control by making restriction feel like care. Think about how subtle that is. When does concern stop being support and start becoming management? When does protection stop helping you and start quietly replacing your ability to trust yourself? When does emotional investment become emotional monitoring? Those questions matter, because not everything that looks supportive is empowering. Not everything that feels protective is healthy. Some behaviors comfort you first, then slowly. They confine you. Not dramatically, gradually, quietly enough that you may call it love while pieces of your independence are disappearing. Today, we are uncovering 5 things toxic partners do that people often mistake for loyalty, protection, devotion, or deep emotional care. And some of them may challenge behaviors you once considered beautiful. Because the first one does not look controlling at all in the beginning. It looks responsible, protective, almost reassuring, until you realize your ability to trust yourself is slowly getting smaller. In fact, it often looks incredibly caring. Someone wants to protect you, guide you, help you avoid mistakes. And honestly, who doesn't want support from someone who loves them? That is exactly why this dynamic becomes so confusing. Because the language sounds thoughtful. I don't think that's good for you. You shouldn't have to deal with this alone. Let me handle it. I know what's best here. On the surface, it can feel comforting, reassuring, like someone is deeply invested in your well-being. But pay attention to what slowly starts happening underneath that care. Your choices begin getting filtered through their judgment. Your instincts become secondary. Your decisions need approval more often than you realize. Not because someone explicitly took away your voice, because gradually you stopped fully trusting it. That shift matters a lot. Because healthy care strengthens your ability to trust yourself. Toxic care slowly teaches you to outsource yourself. Read that again. Healthy care helps you become more connected to your own judgment. Toxic care quietly convinces you that safety lives inside someone else's certainty. You start second-guessing decisions you would have made confidently before. You check with them first. You wait for reassurance. You rely on their interpretation of what is safe, smart, appropriate, reasonable. And at first, that dependency can feel like closeness, teamwork, partnership, but there is an uncomfortable question worth asking. If someone's care consistently makes you feel less capable of navigating your own life, is that support? Or is your autonomy slowly being replaced? Because real support does not weaken your internal compass, it helps strengthen it. And when protection starts becoming a substitute for your own agency, another subtle dynamic often appears. They help you so much, you begin forgetting what it feels like to function without them. This one is rarely talked about because, on the surface, it looks generous, loving, deeply supportive. Someone always helps, always solves, always steps in. Your problems become their mission. Your responsibilities become shared before you even ask. And in the beginning, it can feel amazing. You feel taken care of. less stressed, less alone. Someone is showing up for you in powerful ways. What could possibly be wrong with that? The problem is not support. The problem is what happens when support quietly becomes substitution. Because there is a difference between helping someone and gradually becoming the system they no longer believe they can function without. Pay attention to the pattern. They make the call for you, handle the situation for you, speak on your behalf, manage the problem, organize the solution, and little by little, your participation becomes smaller. Not because you are incapable, because someone else has become more comfortable carrying the wheel. At first, that may even feel like love. Someone is making your life easier. Someone is reducing your burden. Someone is always there. But here is the psychological twist. Not all support empowers you. Some support quietly trains you to function around someone else's control. That sentence deserves reflection. Because when someone repeatedly positions themselves as the problem solver, the protector, the emotional manager, the decision maker, something subtle can begin happening inside you. Your confidence weakens. Your self-trust shrinks. Your sense of capability becomes increasingly relational. You stop asking, what do I think? What do I want? What can I handle? And start asking, what would they do? What do they think? What happens if they are not here? That is a very different emotional landscape. Because healthy care helps you become stronger inside yourself. Toxic care can sometimes create dependence disguised as devotion, not always intentionally, but effectively. And once dependence begins feeling like closeness, another modern version of disguised care often becomes easy to normalize. Constant access, constant updates, constant emotional availability framed as proof of love. This behavior has become so normalized in modern relationships. Many people no longer question it. Constant texting, constant updates, immediate replies, always knowing where the other person is, always being emotionally available, always reachable. And if you hesitate, something feels wrong, suspicious, cold, uncaring. That shift deserves attention. Because when did unlimited access become the definition of emotional closeness? Think about that honestly. When did privacy start looking like distance? When did taking time for yourself begin requiring explanation? Because some toxic partners do not ask for constant access because they feel deeply connected to you. They ask for constant access because distance makes them uncomfortable. That is an important psychological distinction. One comes from trust. The other often comes from anxiety, insecurity, or the need to regulate emotional discomfort through monitoring. But the behavior can look surprisingly loving in the beginning. Just text me when you get there. Let me know what you're doing. I just like hearing from you. I worry because I care. Nothing sounds obviously harmful. That is exactly why this dynamic becomes confusing. Because care and control can sometimes use almost identical language. But look deeper. What happens when you do not respond quickly enough? What happens when you need uninterrupted space? What happens when you want privacy that is not secrecy, just individuality? The answer tells you a lot. Because healthy connection can tolerate temporary distance. Toxic dynamics often struggle with it. Not because distance automatically means danger, because access became the mechanism creating emotional safety. And when access becomes responsible for maintaining emotional stability, relationships quietly become surveillance systems disguised as intimacy. You start updating not because you want connection, because you want to avoid emotional fallout. You stay reachable not because you feel close, because you feel responsible for someone else's comfort. That is a very different emotional experience. And once constant access becomes normalized, another subtle form of disguised care often appears. The endless concern. The partner who is always worried, always advising, always questioning your choices, until concern stops feeling supportive and starts quietly teaching you to doubt yourself. This one is deeply confusing because it rarely feels hostile. It feels caring, attentive, protective. Someone is always concerned about you, your decisions, your friendships, your work, your emotional reactions, your judgment. At first, it can sound thoughtful. I'm just worried about you. I don't think those people are good for you. Are you sure that's a smart decision? I only want you to be careful. Nothing there sounds openly toxic. That is why this dynamic slips past so many people, because concern is supposed to feel loving. But there is a question most people forget to ask. What happens to your self-trust after months or years of being consistently questioned? That changes everything, because occasional concern is normal, healthy even. But when concern becomes constant, repetitive, woven into everyday life, something subtle can begin happening. You start second-guessing yourself, not dramatically, quietly. You hesitate more. You doubt your instincts more. You need reassurance for decisions you used to make confidently. You begin consulting their perspective before trusting your own, and that shift is psychologically important. Because when concern repeatedly teaches you to distrust your own judgment, something deeper than care may be happening. Read that again. Something deeper than care may be happening, because real care does not consistently weaken your relationship with your own mind. Healthy care can challenge you, question you, offer perspective, but it should not quietly train you to believe your judgment becomes safer only after someone else approves it. That is a dangerous emotional transition, because now the relationship is not simply giving you support, it is becoming the authority you rely on to interpret reality. Your choices, your reactions, your confidence, your sense of what is reasonable. And once that happens, boundaries become harder. Autonomy feels riskier. Disagreement feels uncomfortable. Because somewhere along the way, concern stopped being information. It became influence. And that leads to the final behavior. One of the most emotionally powerful forms of disguised care. The moment someone uses sacrifice, devotion, and everything they do for you to make your boundaries feel selfish. This is one of the most powerful forms of disguised care because it does not usually operate through aggression. It operates through moral pressure, through emotional indebtedness, through the feeling that saying no somehow makes you the bad person. You hear things like, I do everything for you. I only want what's best for you. After everything I've done, this is how you respond? I worry because I love you. And pay attention to how psychologically persuasive that language can be. Because now, the conversation is no longer about your boundary. It becomes about their sacrifice, their effort, their devotion, their pain. And slowly, your autonomy starts feeling emotionally expensive. You want space? You feel guilty? You want privacy? You feel ungrateful? You want a boundary? It suddenly feels cold, selfish, unfair. That shift matters. Because some forms of toxic care create emotional debt disguised as devotion. Read that again slowly. Emotional debt disguised as devotion. You begin feeling responsible for protecting their feelings at the expense of protecting your own limits. Not because your boundaries stopped being valid, because the emotional cost of holding them became heavier. And that is how many people slowly abandon themselves without calling it self-abandonment. They call it understanding, compassion, loyalty, being a good partner. But healthy care does not require you to continuously earn the right to be an individual. It does not weaponize sacrifice against your autonomy. You can appreciate someone's effort without surrendering your boundaries to prove gratitude. You can care about someone's feelings without making your freedom responsible for stabilizing them. That distinction changes everything. Because once care becomes moral leverage, love starts feeling less like connection and more like emotional obligation. And that brings us back to the question underneath this entire conversation. How do you tell the difference between real care and care that quietly costs you yourself? So let's return to the question that started this conversation. What if some of the behaviors that made you feel the most protected were actually the behaviors limiting your freedom? That question is difficult because toxic care rarely introduces itself as something harmful. It feels comforting first, supportive first, loving first. That is why people miss it. Not because they are naive. Because the behavior emotionally rewards them before it emotionally confines them. You feel protected, guided, supported, deeply cared for. Someone helps you. Someone worries about you. Someone wants access to your life, your decisions, your emotional world. And slowly, the language of care starts hiding something else. Protection becomes reduced autonomy. Support becomes dependency. Access becomes monitoring. Concern becomes self-doubt. Sacrifice becomes emotional obligation. That transformation rarely happens all at once. It happens gradually, quietly enough that many people keep calling it love while feeling increasingly disconnected from themselves. That is the hidden danger. Because healthy care does not ask you to become smaller in order to feel loved. Healthy care does not weaken your ability to trust your judgment, maintain your boundaries, preserve your individuality, or function confidently inside your own life. It does the opposite. Healthy care helps you become more connected to yourself. Toxic care slowly disconnects you from yourself in the name of love. Read that again. More connected to yourself, not less. That difference may be one of the clearest ways to recognize what kind of care you are actually receiving. Because real love can support you without managing you, protect you without reducing you, help you without replacing your agency, care about you without quietly becoming the center of your decision-making, your self-trust, your emotional freedom. And maybe that is the question I want to leave you with. Which version of care did you once mistake for love? Which behavior felt protective? Until you realized it was slowly changing your relationship with yourself?